I'll sit down and I'll just start writing what's called the vomit pass, which is usually the very first thing you write, because you always go back and redraft it and change it and rewrite it and fix it. And then I just got to kind of find in between how everything falls into place.
So when you read a book, do you read the first chapter and the last chapter and then go back and read the middle?
No, I won't do that.
Hello, everybody. It's Travis Holtree and PJ.
Hello.
And we are here for Done Lite, another episode.
Yes.
Brought to you by Foreman, Watson, Holtree, FWHlegal.com. We are located at 530 Frederica Street, Owensboro, Kentucky, in the high-rise ivory tower. I always do that to get PJ laughing, to put him in a better mood. It makes his day.
It does. It does.
The truth is, 530 Frederica Street is a two-story white building, and it's not a high-rise at all, but we are on the second floor, so we are a little bit elevated when we do these podcasts.
3 stories if you count the roof.
That's right, but we're not on the roof, and we need to do an outside recording one of these days.
On the roof.
That's right, we should, or out on the fire escape. That would be great.
That looks really... That's, we in the last podcast, we used the word sketchy, and I'll be honest. Have you ever
noticed there's no ladder going up to it? There's only a ladder going up to the roof?
To the roof. So not only that, though. There's this really weird, awkward landing that you have to go up, like a gutter or something, or some kind of like awning thing that you have to go up and around.
So really, it's a trap.
It really is.
It's like
it's a trap.
Come out here when it's on fire, when the building's on fire, and find yourself in an even greater predicament.
Yeah, I mean, you either have to drop to the ground or attempt. Then again, if it was a choice between breaking my legs or burning alive, I would probably go with breaking my legs.
There you go. Well, we have started in a totally different direction than I thought we would go, talking about the fire escape. But
yes.
PJ, were you here this week when my mom came by the office and saw everybody? My mom is a little 5 foot tall, little blonde lady.
Yeah, I've met your mom before, but I don't think I was here. I don't know.
Yeah, they were in town. They were in town for Thanksgiving, and got to spend some time with her. Well, my mom and my stepfather are getting ready to go over to Spain.
Oh, that's awesome.
To do some mission work. They've been on the mission field off and on for about 25 years. And so we are excited about that. But one of the cool things, PJ, and this made me, I instantly thought this is podcast material. She had put together for me probably about a 30 to 40 page book. And it was basically the story of our family, the story of our life. And when she gave it to me, I was like, oh, that's nice. But the other night I sat down and I was like, I started reading this thing, and I was like, it was so informative. And it kept me reading it because she uses some humor in it, and she uses some really cool illustrations of actual pictures. And, I just think that a lot of times these days when we want to put something together for people, we'll do it by video. She took the time to have a book bound. It's not something, it was professionally bound. It's really, really well done.
Well, that's cool.
And what I thought about, though, is as I was reading that, is, you and I talk a lot about the importance of the narrative to a case. And one of the reasons that you and I work well together is because narration and the story and the backbone of the drama is in the people, and we because you have the background of working in film production and film. We get along well because even though our two worlds are like diametrically opposed when it comes to profession, they come together when it comes to the way that I dream about telling about a case, and what you do is your pastime, your hobby, your passion, and that is film production.
Right.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. If we have, if we want to go that direction,
absolutely.
I kind of told you I had something up my sleeve. I've always wondered, like, now you are getting funding for a third Volumes of Blood. Is that right? Or
We're working on financing right now, but it's taking it's taking a little longer than what we anticipated because the budget's a bit higher.
Right.
And truthfully, financing is probably my least favorite part because going back to what you said, for me, the fun is in creating, is in the characters and the story that's there to be told. That for me, that's what it's about.
Well, and one thing I guess I've never understood, like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Okay, and I don't want you to answer that question, obviously. What I'm wanting to know is, like, when you're thinking of a film, do you already have the story, like the storyline, and then you start to say, you find the characters, you find the actors, you find the props, and you find the places you're going to film this? Is it the narrative that is it the core? Is that the core?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the backbone of any film production, and there's a lot of facets to filmmaking,
Right.
but the backbone is always the script because that's your guideline. That's what tells you exactly what direction you're going in, how many people need to be involved, and like you said, the props and how much how much the actual production itself entails is all within the script,
Right.
the story.
Right.
So the story always comes first.
So let's just go back to the Volumes of Blood 1 that you did, okay? And I'm working toward here. I'm kind of setting this up like I'm cross-examining you a little bit,
Okay.
because we're going to tie this to what we do, what I do every
Right.
day. But I am trying to educate myself. We haven't discussed this. What we're talking about. This is all
Right.
off the cuff. PJ has, what is it, an idea for a film, and then do you sit down and begin to write it before, like with Volumes of Blood 1? How did the story come up?
So I'd wanted to do an anthology for a while, and what ended up happening was I got in connection with the library because I created a whole other event, and it worked out really well for them, and it's still going on today. And because of that, they said, hey, we'll open up the doors for you and allow you to shoot something here that kind of falls in line with what we've been doing with this event series. So come up with an idea. What ended up happening is that opportunity fell into my lap, and I said, okay, what can I do in a library? The first thing that came up with that was the setting. I like other genres.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked on and done other genres, but horror is kind of my true love. And so I went back to that, and I said, what types of stories can I tell? And then from that point, I took the setting and then said, okay, what kind of people frequent the library? What kind of situations happen in the library? And then how can you take those situations and then skew them a bit to where it would become, where a monster's involved or a ghost is involved and that kind of a thing. Yeah.
So now, do you literally, once you knew that was the direction that you were headed, did you sit down to a computer and a keyboard and just start hammering away at script, or do you write story and then develop script from that? What was the next step?
I was working at UniFirst,
Right.
and I hated that job. And it was the type of job where you could work, and it was muscle memory. Mm-hmm. So my body's doing one thing, my mind is doing something else. Like, that's how easy the work is there.
Right.
Essentially, what was an 8-hour work day, that's when I came up with all the ideas, because I was sitting there sorting emblems. But in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I know that I've got 5 different stories that I have to tell. What are they going to be? Where the ideas stem from, it varies. It could be, it could start out as an idea of, like, I want to write a story around this type of person, or, like one of the stories was about a haunted book. So the idea started out, well, what's in a library? Books. How can you make books scary? So then the idea was that a book was haunted, and there's a librarian is alone in the library trying to put books up, and this one book starts stalking him essentially because it's possessed, kind of a situation. So that's how the stories there came to be. And then when it comes to actually writing the scripts, the way I do it is I always know how I want it to start, and I know how I want it to end. And then what I'll do is I'll come up with several little beats in between, like little plot points. I'll sit down and I'll just start writing what's called the vomit pass, which is usually the very first thing you write, because you always go back and redraft it and change it and rewrite it and fix it. And then I just got to kind of find in between how everything falls into place.
So when you read a book, do you read the first chapter and the last chapter and then go back and read the middle?
No, I won't do that. I know people who do that, but no, I always start from the beginning when it's somebody else's story.
Well, that's interesting because, so it's kind of segueing into the overlap then in what we do, and you've witnessed this firsthand. So we get a case and we know very little about it, and as we start to learn about it, we are kind of given the setting, right? So we learn this is going to be a library. Okay, so this is going to be, and you start to so what we start to do is as we gather information, we start to consider what the narrative of that case is going to be. How can we tell that client's story? And in what way do we tell that client's story? In what ways, I guess I would tell you this to see how you've observed what we go about doing. In what ways have you seen us handle cases differently, even from just the video perspective of what we would include in telling a client's story? You've seen a great variety of things. And what are some of those things?
First of all, the interesting thing about what we do is we're basically making little documentaries every time.
Right.
And I'll break it down. Every story has 3 acts. There's the way it begins. There's the second act, which technically for us would be the collision or whatever it is that brings these people to us. And then there's the third act, and the third act would be what plays out with you guys, like trying to get it settled and that kind of a thing. The interesting thing about what I do is that conflict drives narrative.
Right.
And all these individuals that come to us, there's similarities between their stories, but there's so many different things that happen along the way from what's happening within these individuals' personal lives, like how whatever happened affects them,
right,
or affects their children, affects their spouse, their extended family. We've had people's extended families come in here and give their sides of the story, how it affects their work. And I mean, some of those, we use those attributes. Those are similar attributes that we have in about every presentation, but it varies so drastically from person to person because, no person is the same. No one is the same.
And their story.
The story varies a lot between each individual person.
I don't want it to seem like, hey, let's see how we can entertain the insurance adjuster who's going to watch this. Hey, let's see how we can entertain the jury. Hey, let's see how we can entertain the mediator,
Right.
As opposed to, how can I get the person who will be making the decision in this case to feel
exactly
what it is my client went through? And you hit on some of it where we bring in relatives, we bring in spouses, we bring in kids, but some of the other things that's interesting is, like, in some cases we decide we want to use the 911 call, right? And in some cases we don't. Well, why? Well, in some 911 calls we have screaming, we have information that's given to us by an eyewitness that is totally unrelated to the wreck, but you get their voice that is there literally seconds after the catastrophe.
Right.
But in some cases, when you listen to the 911 call, it arouses very little emotion. You would agree.
Or sometimes you'll only have complete strangers who are just calling and they're monotone and there's really nothing there to use.
Right. And so that doesn't need to be that's an example of what I'm talking about. Is
it doesn't further the narrative.
It doesn't further the narrative. It doesn't make the reader, the watcher, the listener want to engage. And our job is to engage the ultimate decision maker and to do the right thing for this client. So we use 911 calls. One of the more recent ones that you and I have really hooked into is the body cams and the dash
cam footage
from police cars and from actual police officers.
Yeah. And security footage from a neighborhood was another one that we had recently that we were able to use. That
it shows the illumination of headlights, and then the headlights go off immediately before a collision. And we have that because a house that was 4 or 5 blocks up the road had a camera that clocked that entire street.
Yeah.
And we got that.
And that's the other thing too, is that, and sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off, but from like going back to narrative, from a narrative standpoint, this single video clip, which was 12 seconds long, yes, it caught the collision, but it didn't just catch the collision. It caught so much more of the story, like what you just said. This individual's driving at night. It shows them driving with their headlights off, and it shows them speeding. It shows headlights coming on and then going off, and then the collision. Right. So there's so many of these little details that you can add to what led up to this individual, having one of the worst experiences in their life.
Right. Exactly. And showing that they had no fault in it.
Exactly.
And it was, in fact, the fault of this. But there's a big difference. Let's talk about, I'm glad you mentioned, this will be a great case study. There's a big difference. You are an adjuster from an insurance company, and I call you up on the phone, and I say, John Smith was driving down the street at nighttime with his lights off. He turned them back on, and then he was going too fast, and he runs through a stop sign and hits my client. Okay. That's scenario one. That's one way we could choose to communicate that. We could type that to them in a letter. We could tell them to that on the phone. Okay, now we can say, all right, here is a still shot picture of what the vehicles look like after collision, but still have to type in some of the narrative, right? Okay, this is how it happened. But when you can plug in actual footage, you don't have to say a word because they see it and they can internalize it in a lot different way because they see it with their own eyes. They feel that worry of, oh my gosh, this is about ready to happen. This is about ready to go down, And it has so much more power than just a typed text or a written word,
Right.
It has that power, and when you can bring that in and then put some narration behind it, and you can then show after pictures and things like that, you begin to tell a story.
Right.
And that is powerful. And it's very important. I think it's where, not to brag about our office and the way we do things, but I honestly think that if you undertake the responsibility of communicating to a decision maker, and when I say a decision maker, the one that will ultimately pay a person that's been injured for his or her loss, you have the duty to get across to that person why that compensation should be a certain amount or should be reasonable. And just handing them a stack of papers and trying to tell them a story by typing it, I just don't think it gets it done. Do you?
No. As a matter of, and I'm glad you said that, because in some ways, and I'm not saying every insurance adjuster hates their job, or I'm sure some of them love it. There's a horrible job for everybody out there who enjoys, because when I worked at UniFirst, I mean, I didn't know anybody who liked working there, but I didn't associate with everybody, and they had like 350 people working there. But anyway, I kind of put myself in the position of, if I was an insurance adjuster and my job was day in and day out getting thousands upon thousands of documents that I have to read through. If you had the choice between reading a police report or watching something that someone has put together that kind of explains that police report and shows it to you, and if I was an insurance adjuster where every single day my job was reading documents, I 100% understand and can see how someone gets put in this mindset where it's muscle memory.
Same old thing.
It's just going through the motions. It's going through the motions. Oh, another police report. another physical therapy record, another date, another date of service from a hospital. It's the same thing over and over and over again. A lot of these people get very desensitized, and it dehumanizes what these clients that we represent are going through.
You're exactly right. And one of the things that's important for us to understand is we, here on the podcast try to educate people in making the right choice when they choose a lawyer, is that if an attorney spends the time and the resources and the energy to do it right on the front end, number one, it's a lot less likely that the case will have to stagger on for 2 or 3 years, because the insurance company immediately sees, oh my goodness, if they've produced this video that has the projected testimony of 3 or 4 different people in it, it's got all the photographs, it's got every medical record come to life, right? And that they understand we have a grip on our case, and we're ready, and they can pay us now or they can pay us later, but the story's not going to change.
Right.
And when they realize that, then you start to see being treated reasonably up front a lot more often, which is what we've seen. And so I think it's important to understand that if it doesn't translate into a settlement because an insurance company is playing hardball, okay, we're ready for trial. And guess where that story gets told next? We may not get to show the entire
people who
video.
aren't desensitized.
That's right. It gets shown to the decision makers,
right.
12, and here in Kentucky, 12 jurors. You persuade 9 of them to rule for you. And you start off with them, ladies and gentlemen, on such and such day, Mr. Smith had a decision to make. Unfortunately, he chose to get into a car and drive down a neighborhood street at excessive speeds, flipping his headlights off and on. And that choice changed my client's life forever. And while I'm showing this, but don't take my word for it. Look at this. And you show the same video that you put in that video presentation 2 years before that, and you send it to the insurance company, and now you have an audience that's listening to the story and they're engaged in the narrative. Right. And I think that that's why we've hit the nail on the head with these video presentations. Now, is it easy to do? No. What's your current backlog? How many are you backlogged?
Well, right now I've got 12 total.
12 on the
12
board.
12 total on the board
that need to be produced, right? And there's probably another 12 that'll be added to that board within the next 30 days.
Oh yeah, I would say I wasn't trying to talk over you, but for every 1 or 2 that I get off, there's 2 or 3 more get put on there at the same time.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's for you, job security. For us, knowing we're doing it right, though, there is some joy in the fact that we're storytellers. As you know, I'm a person of faith, and my faith means a lot to me. And people used to say, "Well, let me read you a story from the Bible." I take the Bible as true, and so it's not a story. Kind of insinuates, well, we're fudging a little here. We're fudging a little,
right?
And I think it's important that what we are doing is bringing to life facts,
right.
Which a lot of what I read, the craziness of some of the accounts of the Old Testament and the Bible, I'm like, man, that would be a great movie, but basically. Those are accounts of facts that people wrote down, and we're doing the same thing. We're taking facts. We're taking, for example, the fact that somebody was driving down a street, excessive speeds, turning their lights off and on, right?
Right.
We take that and we illuminate it. We bring it to life. And I just think, I think it's the way to practice these cases. I'm convinced it is. And of course, it brought you into the firm.
Exactly.
So you're going to agree with everything I say.
Oh, 100%. Like this podcast, this is one of several things that you guys, and now I can say we, have done that nobody else is doing. It's important because there are companies out there whose sole purpose is creating these types of videos.
Right.
You hire these companies to come in and make these videos, but you all you cut out the middleman, where you created a position to where now that's what I'm doing, and nobody else in this area is doing that for their clients. Right. But we are.
Well, let me tell you what people don't know about that. So if if somebody hires a company or an individual to produce a video for a case, for a mediation or for a settlement presentation or something like that, when they pay the producer of that video X amount of dollars, okay? But they turn around when the case is resolved and they expense that to the client. So the client, let's say, gets a settlement of Y, but you deduct X, the cost of the video, from the settlement.
Right.
So they're netting less, okay? Now, what we've done is we've said we believe in our clients and we believe in their story, and they shouldn't be penalized by me having to outsource video production work and then billing it to their case. Instead, I'll eat the overhead of having that person on staff, and I'll be able to produce a video in every single case I have, and I don't have to pass that expense on to my client. You see what I'm saying? Because they don't get billed for a video production. And so that's one of the things that people say, well, we do video. Yeah, we do video. Yeah, but your client pays for that.
Right.
Your client pays a premium for that where ours don't, And so, and it's the other thing is we are, and I'm glad you mentioned the podcast. This podcast is pre-educating future clients. If one person has listened to the podcast that we had, I think from the last episode about mediation, for example, if one future client has heard that podcast, we don't have to educate them on what a mediation is. When we guys go, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. I've heard that on your podcast. I know what that is." And our job as lawyers should be to be transparent with that information, not hold it in some type of exile and only give it to the people that need to know it. Our job should be to educate people so that we have educated jurors, so that we have educated citizens, that when they come to hire us, they know what they should expect. And that's why I'm not afraid of this. We should be transparent.
Right.
We should be educating our community on legal issues so that they can be better consumers and they can know who they're getting when they hire a lawyer. And that's what Law Lite's about.
To kind of follow up with what we were talking about a few minutes ago, I think what I take away from if I was on the outside looking in at what I do, we do occasionally what's called the classic settle demand, which is what gets sent to every adjuster gets from every attorney's office, and that's just the stacks upon stacks of paper that has desensitized these insurance adjusters to almost in some ways work against the people that are needing their help.
Exactly.
And what these videos do is these videos take a stack of paper and they turn it into a real story. You could look at every case as just another case, but what these videos do is they say, look, this is not just another case. This is a real person, and they've got real emotions. And you're a person, and you've got real emotions. Take 10 minutes and just see what these people are going through. See what their family has to endure.
Right.
We're going to tell you. We're going to show you. We're going to use graphics. We're going to use a little bit of sad piano, but we're reaching out to you to let you know that these are real human beings. This is not just a number on a sheet of paper. And that's what makes what we do so different from everybody else.
Amen. And the other thing, though, is that if they choose to ignore it still, which is their choice,
right,
then we're prepared to show it to a jury.
Exactly.
And not necessarily that video, but we're prepared because we know the story and we're ready to tell the story. And that's the beauty of this. By the time one of those is produced, the attorneys, the staff, everybody knows what that case is about, and we're ready to go. And that, I think, is one of the beauties, the blessings in disguise to going through the labor of producing, that type of a story in every case. So good stuff, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really exciting times around here. I think that, obviously, is there something else we can do to be better? Absolutely, all the time, striving to get better. What can we do to make those better videos? What can we do to be more creative? What can we do to educate? And those are, it's one of the reasons it's exciting to be a part of this team at Foreman Watson Holtree. And so I hope our listeners are, again, educated. And thank you for your insight, PJ, on the some of the filmmaking, because I think
I appreciate you asking.
That was a natural segue into some of this good discussion we had about what we're trying to do different here.
And you've never really asked me about. I mean, you've asked me about Volumes of Blood, but never really to this extent.
Yeah,
so
right. No,
that was kind of cool.
I was really wanting to know kind of how that comes about.
Now you don't have to Google it.
That's right. That's right. Hey, real quick, do you have a question? I didn't write one down. We kind of had to get in here today in the studio pretty quick. Do you have a question you'd like to throw to the expert here on filmmaking?
I do. So this term actually works perfectly, to a degree for what we're talking about. So, what is portmanteau filmmaking?
Portmanteau is pretty much that is when we don't know and we are belaboring. I kind of feel like when I look at a multiple choice question right now, and every possible answer looks wrong. So what is it?
You're portmanteauing right now. No. It is an anthology film.
Okay.
Where the stories or sequences are interwoven together.
Okay.
So they're all interconnected.
I gotcha.
Which is what Volumes of Blood is. It's an anthology film where Creepshow, for instance, is an anthology film where there's a wraparound, but none of the stories are connected. They're just like stories, essentially like what's supposed to be in an EC comic,
right?
Just telling random stories. Whereas something like Volumes of Blood is all interconnected through location, which is like the library, and then some characters go from one story to the next.
Right.
There's little things here and there that you catch. So that's the difference between just an anthology film with random.
Portmanteau.
Portmanteau is.
Is there a Portman 1 and a Portman 3?
No, I think that's just
Portmanteau. Okay.
Hey,
everybody, thank you for your time. And we know you have a lot of podcasts you can choose from, but we are thankful that you tune in regularly to Done Lite, brought to you by Foreman Watson Holtry, fwhlegal.com. Check us out online. Check us out on social media. And most of all, hit Spotify or iTunes and stay regular. Subscribe to us so that you don't miss an episode. PJ, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, signing off, fwhlegal.com, Done Lite.